In the final minute, Bennett for the pocket, launches to the edge, touchdown, A.D. Mitchell.
Chase McGrath for the win for the Volunteers. From 40, on the way, knuckleball. He got it!
What is happening, everybody? It is Sunday. That's right. I'm finally doing this on time. My name is Colin Bashnigal here. Bash the CFB Show is where you can find me on TikTok. I'm very active on there. You can also find me on Twitter or X at Bash_CFB. And, of course, if you want to tune into the live streams, Bash_CFB is how you can open it on Twitch. I want you guys to comment and like, but mostly comment down below because opinion plus discussion equals community. Let's build a community over here with some discussion. Without further ado, let's get into the Week 10 recap. Ohio State, my Buckeyes, repping them right now. Survive and advance. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. But I'm just going to tell you this, a little bit of a spoiler to my top 25. Ohio State's punished from this. Rutgers, to me, is a pretty solid team, but they are very one-dimensional on offense and cannot throw the ball whatsoever. And on defense, Ohio State still has more talent. Ohio State has Emeka Egbuka back yesterday. They have Marvin Harrison Jr., and I get he scored 2 touchdowns. He was terrible throughout the entire game. They tried to force feed him 2 touchdowns to make the headlines look a little bit better. At the end of the day, the offense was basically Travion Henderson having another big day, and that was it. Kyle McCord had some nice moments. He was not overall reckless with the ball. He made one terrible decision the entire game, and that ended up costing Ohio State the lead at the half. Now, this offense is sputtering, and it is ugly. This defense is tremendously physical, but they got, in a way, moved against this Rutgers offensive line, and Kyle Munnin guy ended up having a really big day for Rutgers, and Gavin Wimsatt had a little bit on the ground as well, which is to be expected from Wimsatt, but that's you need to be able to stop the run against a team like Michigan. And what I saw, and albeit it seems like Rutgers has the best rushing attack that Ohio State has faced, they don't necessarily have the best running backs. They don't necessarily have the best offensive line, but the conglomeration and the connection together with the mobile quarterback, they have the best run offense that Ohio State has seen. As far as just eye test and looking how effective they are, they're probably a little bit undervalued in the statistical categories in the run game because of the fact that they are so one-dimensional and teams can game plan around that. So why is Ohio State playing a ton of nickel? I know they got that pick 6 playing in the nickel, but I don't know why Jim Knowles decided to do that. They need to employ a third linebacker a little bit more often, especially when they go up against Michigan. We'll talk about Michigan later on. This was not an impressive win for Ohio State. I told you guys this is not a number 1 team in America right now. Kyle McCord is getting a little bit better, but he needs to avoid those dang mistakes. That interception was horrible. And then some of these decisions to check down the ball when he has a Marvin Harrison Jr. wide open, it's like, well, now I know why. He doesn't feel confident with leveling his passes with the levels and getting that second level type of read, those intermediate passes down. Like he does not seem comfortable when it comes to big throws. And he's not making these big time throws, but he was making smart decisions outside of the one, and I'll take that as an Ohio State fan all day. How about this one? Texas hangs on in overtime against Kansas State. Kansas State had this one in the bag. So did Texas, albeit, they were up 27-7. So in all fairness, I feel like the team who probably played better for majority of the game ended up winning, but the team who made the big plays down the stretch ended up losing. This defense absolutely locked up Texas's offense in the second half that helped them spark this comeback. And it really was a missed PAT and a field goal that was the difference in this game. It really was. I think Kansas State was probably the right pick here for me to make. And if this is in Manhattan, ain't no way that Texas is winning this ball game. But it wasn't. It was in Austin, and I very well knew that when I picked the upset. And I felt like it was right there right about to happen, and it just didn't. That 4th and goal from the 4 play call, I questioned it at the time. I'm like, 4 yards is a lot to get. This isn't an ordinary 2-point conversion, and it's an additional yard, right? You have a free rusher, and all of a sudden the game's just over on that. No, it's just a terrible way to end the game. I thought KSU should have kicked the field goal after Steve Sarkisian called the timeout, because it allows Pete Kwiatkowski to get a good look at what they're doing and get the right play call. And Texas had the right play call, and they were able to win. Survive and advance is the name of the game. If you are a Texas Longhorn fan, you lost to Oklahoma. It doesn't matter to me if you play Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship, and we'll get to them here in a minute. It doesn't matter. I don't think you have to avenge that loss. That head-to-head win on the road at Alabama by 10 points, the committee should not rank Alabama above Texas at any point, no matter what Alabama does, if they have the same record. And of course, if they do have the same record, that does indicate that Texas wins the Big 12, and it's a 12-1 Texas, 12-1 Alabama. So I think we're looking at a situation here where Texas just needs to take care of their business. They survive. They need to keep on doing this. They're going to probably have to have 1 or 2 more games with Malik Murphy. I don't know the timeline for sure. I've heard 3 weeks out, but I don't know the for sure timeline for Quinn Ewers being out for Texas. Malik Murphy, we need more of what you did in the first half and less of what you did in the second half. He looks like a really good player, but he also still looks like a very raw talent. Ole Miss wins a thriller versus Texas A&M, a massive win for Ole Miss. It kind of keeps them in the race if you really think about it, but not really, right? At the time it did. Alabama, of course, is not going to drop 2 SEC West games. If you look at what Alabama has left on their schedule, or SEC games, they have at Kentucky and they have Auburn. Both are kind of losable, but not really. Like, I don't think they're going to lose either of these games. Now, this is a year where they're going to be going to Auburn and they're going to Kentucky. So the road games are going to be there for Alabama in both of those instances. But unless Kentucky's defense plays crazy and their passing game shows up like they did against Tennessee, Kentucky has no shot of pulling off the upset. And if Kentucky doesn't pull the upset, the West is all wrapped up. But Ole Miss is still clinging to a little bit of hope, and they certainly are right there with 1 loss still this deep into the season. Got to give Lane Kiffin a ton of credit. They lost a ton on defense, and it showed in this game in a shootout. But they're finding ways to win, and that's what's really important for this Ole Miss team. As we go a little bit later on, Army does stun Air Force, a ranked Air Force team, in the Commander-in-Chief Trophy game. This was massive for Army. This was massive for Jeff Monken. He got back to the roots of the triple option that they had somewhat abandoned this year, and it was fun to see. They ended up moving the ball very well in the first half. I think they got up 23-0, and they just stifled an Air Force offense that has been unstoppable, playing against a team that practices against this all the time, and they're building up for that Commander-in-Chief Trophy, and all of a sudden, Army is just a win against the weaker of the 3, Navy, from winning that Commander-in-Chief Trophy, and nobody thought that Army had a shot in this game. Air Force was an 18-point favorite, and yet it was Army who covered the 18. 26 total points. Of course, the under hit. You cannot be that surprised that Commander-in-Chief game, the under hit. That's all I'm going to say. Luther Burden gets hurt in the Georgia loss, and the reason why I bring this up is this happened pretty early in the second quarter, pretty early in the game. If Luther Burden is in, this is a down-to-the-wire game to me. That passing offense was very effective against Georgia, and Georgia showed off a little bit of vulnerability that you're going to go into the Ole Miss game next week thinking, oh, crap, this is an Ole Miss offense that can expose what Georgia's defense is lacking. Now, I'm not sure if Ole Miss is going to win. I'll have plenty of time to preview it, study it, and we'll talk about that later in the week. But Luther Burden getting hurt in this game, I'm not saying that's the reason Georgia won. I think they would have probably been able to make plays to win this game down the stretch. Carson Beck looks fantastic in this system, doing a great job. Oscar Delp getting a touchdown for the Georgia Bulldogs as well. So I like what I see from Georgia. I'm not alarmed, and I'm keeping them number one until they lose. Spoiler alert to my top 25 video that's coming up in the next 24 to 30 hours. But yeah, this Georgia team is still impressive. So is Missouri, though, and Missouri was right there with them. And I think we got to be impressed with the fact that Missouri went toe-to-toe with that LSU offense. And Missouri's defense is playing better now than they had been. Georgia was still able to have their way on some possessions against this Missouri defense, but the Missouri defense is playing a lot better. I think I said offense. The Missouri defense is playing a lot better, and that offense is really good, especially when Burden is out there. If Burden stayed out there, this would have been a completely different game, but props to Georgia for a big-time win. Props to Missouri for being competitive and fighting hard. Oklahoma State exposes Oklahoma in the final bedlam. I was on the wrong side of this. I gave my credit to Austin in our group chat, who I kind of debated. It was a very civil type of debate, but I'm like, I'm not sure if Oklahoma State has the ability to do this because I think Oklahoma contains Ollie Gordon enough. I felt like Oklahoma contained Ollie Gordon enough, but this passing attack for Oklahoma State got loose. Like Bowman had probably the best game of his career thus far. And this Oklahoma defense is back in its shell. Another close loss for Brent Venables. It's becoming a little bit of a questionable mess for Oklahoma right now. And I'm, a team that started out so hot and a team that was able to beat Texas in the Cotton Bowl the way that they did, winning a late game like that with such big magnitude, to see them lose 2 games in a late game situation, it's very disheartening if you are a Sooner fan right now to see it. As far as Oklahoma State goes, not enough people are talking about the turnaround that Mike Gundy has given this team. It was not that long ago that they lost 33-7 to a 4-5 South Alabama team. Now, South Alabama, they were with Carter Bradley. They were playing with a lot of confidence off of last year's 10-win season. So they were, at that time, a pretty solid and upper echelon G5 team. And I'm hoping that South Alabama pulls it out because I thought South Alabama was going to have a great season again this year. They haven't had that. But even without that, losing to South Alabama 33-7, you lose a lot of hope in that situation. Now this Oklahoma State team is tied for the lead in the Big 12 and in position where they could potentially make the Big 12 championship if they can win the next 3 games. I doubt they will, but Ollie Gordon is emerging as the best running back in America. No matter where you're at, you could talk about all these running backs, how Dylan Johnson performed, which, I mean, he's definitely not because he hasn't been performing like that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Quinshon Judkins, really good player. Blake Corum, of course. Travion Henderson, the tear that he's been on. But Ollie Gordon is putting up production unlike any running back in America right now, and it's not even close. I am very impressed with the Pokes. All right, Florida State, ugly win. I just want to touch on this for a minute because it was a little bit rough on offense to begin with, but Jordan Travis really pulled it together. Trey Benson had the big run, and this offense got it together. And when things were ugly, this looks good. So even though the headline is a negative connotation, I'm giving Florida State a lot of credit here and kind of a gross, sloppy game against a Pitt team that's very, very bad. They took control of the game when they had the opportunity to, and they took control. They ran with it, and they just got out of there with a victory. I'm more impressed with Florida State getting an ugly win than I am with like an Ohio State, despite the fact that Ohio State played a much, much better team in Rutgers, a 6-3 football team versus a 2-7 Pittsburgh squad. Speaking of 2-7, Michigan pulls away from a 2-7 Purdue team. They still really haven't played anybody. Their toughest game, of course, against Rutgers. And albeit they were at home and albeit that this was a 7-point game at halftime between Michigan and Rutgers, but there's that common data point that you have between Ohio State and Michigan. And at the end of the day, that crap doesn't matter. Last year, Ohio State was beating all of the common opponents by more than what Michigan did outside of Penn State. And Michigan was able to win. So it doesn't mean that Ohio State can't win. But, I mean, Michigan looks like a better team. And them doing what they did to Purdue, it was very similar to what Ohio State did, but it almost seemed a little bit more dominant on defense. And I think that Michigan just has that dominance factor on defense That Ohio State doesn't. They're both really solid across the board. They both kind of allowed, but the disruption that Michigan has is something that Ohio State misses, even though Ohio State had a pick 6 against Rutgers. That was, I think, a 93-yard return. Very impressed with the Michigan Wolverines. Sign stealing aside, we don't need to talk about that the rest of the season for the most part. I don't think it had that big of an impact, and I certainly don't think it's really happening anymore with the NCAA watching them very closely. Penn State guts Maryland, absolutely destroys them, shows offensive improvement in this 51-15 victory, albeit James Franklin kind of ran up the score. They were up 38-15 pretty late in that game, and they ended up running away with it. But Maryland's just in shambles, and Penn State needed that big confidence booster. And now we're looking at a massive weekend in college football next week where you have Georgia and Ole Miss in a top 10 matchup, and you also have Penn State and Michigan and what is likely going to be another top 10 matchup right there. So 2 top 10 matchups at minimum next week. And then you have Oregon, USC. That should be a lot of fun. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens in that Penn State-Michigan game. Penn State playing with their life on the line. Michigan, first test. It is going to be an absolute movie, a cinematic masterpiece, and that'll be at noon Eastern time. I am amped for that. I'll also be going to the Ohio State night game against Michigan State. Hopefully it's not, a situation where I'm going to be freezing my butt off. Alabama runs away from LSU, specifically Jalen Milroe ran away from LSU. I mean, running for, I think, over $160 and 4 touchdowns. LSU had no answer. Their defense is terrible, just Swiss cheese right through them. Holes all over that defense. It is bad. Like, that secondary is terrible. But what that offensive line was able to do against this LSU front, that was really impressive. And Alabama continues to improve. One caveat, even though they were my preseason national championship pick, and I'll stick with that, and I haven't really ran from that, even though I picked them to do it with 2 losses and be a 2-loss team making the playoff. The one thing I'm going to say about this Alabama team right now is they have Tommy Rees. That's all I could say. And Kevin Steele also made some questionable defensive calls in that first half where I was just like, what is going on? Jaden Daniels, I just want to talk about this. I've already talked about enough with people. Dallas Turner is a filthy player. Maybe that wasn't the filthiest hit. Maybe that wasn't filthy intent. I think he just hit Jaden Daniels with the intent to hurt him, and that does not belong in football. Just like pummeling somebody's head in the ground and trying to rip somebody's head off and trying to smack the crap out of a player and missing because it was an awkward angle. And all the dirty stuff that Dallas Turner has, I've gone on record and talked about it. I don't need to talk about it anymore. Nothing's going to change because I'm just a little old YouTuber trying to make some college football content and build a community. Alabama, you deserve a lot of respect for this win, but Dallas Turner, to me, is a filthy player, and I can't stand to see some of the things that he does because there's no place in it in football. Now, incidental stuff, maybe that was incidental, like I said. If it was, okay, fine. But the problem is he's already built a reputation in my head for the stuff that he's done post-snap. So not as a part of football. You can even take away the nasty face mask that he had against Jackson Dart. Some of the things that he's done after the play and post-snap and away from the play and stuff, just cheap shots. It's not even like he's just like a guy with a chip on his shoulder trying to pick a fight with somebody. It's cheap stuff. It's cheap stuff trying to get people hurt. And there's no place for that in this sport. Ridiculous. Nobody will discipline him, though. Nobody will do anything. He's just an overrated edge rusher who is benefiting off of the image that Alabama brings. He's not that good. He's good. He's productive. He's very athletic, but he's not this like top 5 talent like people act like, specifically Alabama's fans act like. Like he's probably the 4th edge rusher in this upcoming draft. He's probably the 2nd best edge rusher next to Chris Braswell on his team this year. Anyway, rant over as we talk about our final game of the day. USC's defensive woes continue. Now, this is a defense that just continues to give you gold when it comes to the rush defense. I mean, what they allowed Jaden Ott to do last week in the first 18 minutes of the game, what they've allowed teams to do, I can't even imagine what James Whittington and Irving are going to do next week to this USC defense. It is going to be absolutely a train wreck because this is a Washington rushing attack that has not been all that productive this year. It's been the worst out of any of the top 5 unbeaten teams. And yet, Dylan Johnson looked like Barry Sanders on you, 256 yards, absolutely ridiculous. Alex Grinch needs to get fired. If he's not, I don't know what is going on. Caleb Williams, yeah, he's crying and he's a little bit upset. He poured his heart out into this game, but dude, you're acting like it's over. Maybe he actually is going to give up on his team for these last 2 games. I don't know. I tried to tell you USC fans that this stretch was going to be really, really rough for you guys, and there's no way that USC comes away with any less than 2 losses. Well, this is their 3rd. Losing to Washington. And they got Oregon. They got Oregon and UCLA in the back part of this. Thank goodness UCLA was fraudulent. They lost to Arizona 27-10, like I called. We'll talk about walk that line here as we pull that up. But yeah, I mean, this is just, it was pretty bad. All right, walk that line. We're going to call this up right here. Bang, Wisconsin -9.5. That did not hit. Wisconsin, what are we doing? Losing to Indiana. Tragic magic, I guess. That's what the college football, the college football experience, that's what it's called, did on the Sports Gambling Podcast, which is very entertaining. Like Colby, he does a great job there. Very funny dude and very entertaining, and it's a lot of fun. It's certainly a lot better to give that out for free instead of putting it behind a paywall and lying that you're like 89% on the week, Rico. Texas A&M Ole Miss, though, that over hit. So we're 1-1 there. Kansas State +4. It hit. They lost by 3, so we got that one. FAU, UAB, the over hit. So we're 3-1 through this first slide. And then we continue on. Illinois, 4-1 right there with +1.5. They win by 1 in a thriller against Minnesota. That was a great, great game. Georgia State did not cover the +5.5. I didn't change that. They weren't favored by 5.5 against James Madison. They were +5.5. They did not keep that ball game close. I thought there was a chance that Georgia State could make that close there in the third quarter, and then James Madison just pulled away. Kansas winning outright. No shock to me there. Kansas is a really good team, and they have a good culture. So right now, as we look at it through this 7, we're 5-2, and I'll take that all day. But we get this 3-0. Rice losing by 5, a heartbreaker against SMU. But again, I knew that game would be competitive. Arizona just dominating the crap out of UCLA late last night. And then late last night, Utah State winning a thriller in overtime against San Diego State. 2 teams that have been struggling all year. Gives me an 8-2 record on the week and gets me up to 70-64-2. I told you guys early on that we would rebound. Hopefully we stay rebounded the rest of the year. I'm not going to give up playing because I'm above 500. We're going to try to get as good as we possibly can. I just ask for you guys to please, like I said, hit the like button. Comment down below what you think of everything. And thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys during the top 25 video. Have a great